I remember being asked by a member of the trust that I worked for at the time. I said to him, I was a very wealthy man, and he said, and where are you working, dear? And I said, I'm working on a council estate. And he said, on a council estate? What would a council estate? What would arts have to do with a council estate?
The upsurge of community activity in Belfast didn't happen as it did in England here, because like every other sphere of life, we were hindered by the Troubles. Whole range of things like women's rights, the place of women in society, didn't happen here later. Equal pay, whole areas of social legislation didn't happen here because we were more concerned with staying alive.
The 70s was pretty much a desolate period from where I came from, sort of growing up in West Belfast in the Falls Road. The arts were non-existent.
So I came to Belfast in 1974, and I just couldn't believe that for a city which is roughly the same size as Edinburgh, maybe slightly smaller, and nobody went out anywhere, and the city centre was totally empty after 5 o'clock at night. And of course the reason for it was that the Troubles were preventing people from going out.
People were so scared to go out to theatres or whatever they were doing. It was within their own community.
It was a free-for-all, you know. You had your ratting, you had your shootings.
And to put it bluntly, in the 70s and 80s, the leadership that we had around us was paramilitary leadership, very much so. You know. And that's what had such a big effect on communities and what they did and what some of those individuals and young people within those communities did and where they ended up.
It was very divided. Every area had their own niche.
Would you like to say a few words, sir?
Just discuss the poetic situation here at the moment. It's dire. Belfast will erupt shortly.
Tit for tat killings, you know, people terrified to walk down the streets. I mean, I remember one young girl saying to me, we had a workshop and we were talking about what was heaven like. And she said, heaven would be walking down to the bottom of my street and not worrying about being shot before I got to the bottom of it.
I was in a car coming down the Antrim Road, and he just rolled the window down, hung out, and just started spraying the bullets all around us.
I all run in this shop. I just felt everything hit me and I fell on the ground there.
And then there was blood, just continuous blood everywhere, just everywhere.
You had a kind of populist culture which tended to revolve around music.
That was the valve that people were able to sort of let loose and have a sense of identity.
And then you had, as it were, the Arts Council's idea of culture, which tended to be principally the Ulster Orchestra and the Lyric Theatre.
Right, I think what we'll get is a walking in shot, and then you can sort out who they are. The one in the golden dress a few bit back is Princess Margarita of Romania. We've also got the one in the blue dress is the Duchess of Bronx.
Well, it was a Protestant or a Catholic working class background. Arts were handed out from high, and working class people had very little experience of arts.
The Queen's Festival. It was very obvious that it wasn't the city itself, it was the Queen's academics and the academics' wives, and that they were seizing this opportunity. There were traffic jams at 7:15 at night. Everyone was trying to get to the events in the festival to get some culture which they had been starved of for the rest of the year. It wasn't the ordinary people of Belfast.
It was just so removed. It was irrelevant to the lives of, I think, most people in sort of disadvantaged, marginalised societies.
I never knew anybody in my life up to that 25 years of age who I would have known went to the theatre. Nobody ever came back to me and said, "I saw a great play last night."
The wider context was quite piecemeal. There were no clear funding streams, or the sort of bigger organisations were only starting to be developed.
Certainly I believe the Arts Council, that was part of their task, to try and keep this view of a balanced society, and the arts were seen as a stabilising, civilising influence. If you had introduced people who were questioning society, they would have been seen by people outside the arts as, "Oh, you're siding with the terrorists." That was the accusation. "Oh, you're giving sustenance to the terrorists." So the Arts Council, unfortunately, turned its back basically on any forms of art that contained politics. It found it very hard to deal with big political issues, and indeed artists themselves found it very difficult to deal with issues. They would be seen as being divisive or disruptive or taking sides.
I tell the story now without any embarrassment that when Michael Longley and the Arts Council turned us down, I went to Billy McMillan, the commanding officer of the official area in Belfast, and asked him for £50 for our first set, and he gave me it. The only other community theatre groups that I knew in Belfast right through the 70s would have been ourselves and Desi Wilson.
And really it was a theatre whose scripts were derived and ideas were derived from the concerns of the people at that particular time and enacted on the stage.
Desi Wilson was Ballymurphy. We were in Turf Lodge, in fact. We landed each other lights at one stage and stuff like that.
But it was all very radical theatre, all very agitprop, and all delivering a message.
Oh dear, what can the matter be? There's no jobs for the likes of me. I would do anything you like to offer me. I'm just an unemployed Catholic.
Going to People's Theatre was an experience. Not only had I to transverse across the most dangerous part of the city, but you had to go up to the mill, and getting up those steps was those stone steps, very dangerous. But when you got into the People's Theatre, it was a fantastic experience to see theatre that made you laugh, made you cry, really gripped you with the issues that they were beginning to deal with.
Me and my mates go around and catch rats.
As people become more educated in this society, they want more arts. When you keep people ignorant and uneducated and illiterate, as my parents were, they don't know about the arts. Straight away from our very first play, We Want Work, We Want Bread, in 1976, we had an audience. And we've always had an audience.
If we're going to face up to the men on the committee, we may as well face up to them in the house too.
Do you mean to tell me if he orders me to make him a job of tea, I can tell him to go and lick me arse?
Well, if that's how you want to put it, Molly, yes, our days of second-class citizenship are over.
Very strong responses from audiences to them. People identified them with them straight away, which of course brings the lie or puts the lie on that people don't go to, people in class areas aren't interested in theatre. We would decide to do a play that would thematically be about housing, or it would be about people on the dole, or it would be about British Army presence on the streets. People loved that.
Too right. Come on, we'll go in and watch the rest of this film. Your mum is about to get Paul Newman into bed.
Oh God, I wish it was me. Here, do you know I wrote a letter to Paul Newman once, did you?
Lots of these marginalised communities that really had no means of communicating beyond their own community, or even within their own community, what the culture of that community is, what the big contentions are, what the issues that they would like to communicate.
Art includes creative ways of picturing who we are and where we want to go and who we want to be, which is what we think we needed at the time. And we needed to show pictures of alternative ways of living together.
I served my time as a printer. There I learned the skills of a very new kind of technology of small offset, and therefore I was able to apply those skills to helping people produce magazines. And these magazines were from alternative underground cultural magazines to community magazines to magazines dealing with redevelopment to magazines dealing with campaigning. And the knowledge of how to create publications was quite a breakthrough in people beginning to express themselves and also get their ideas across.
You know, I mean, what got me involved with photography was to give people a camera. You know, you think you've been wronged here, take a photograph, highlight it, highlight your issue, you know.
Certainly one of the groups who understood the need for video and film was the Irish language community. And while they had, as it were, just established their own Irish Gaeltacht area by building their own houses, and they approached us and said, hey, how can we have our own television in our own houses? Can we link our own houses up to produce our own TV? This is something we tried to put our heads to. How could they get their own community television at that time?
There were a group of people who were very concerned to connect artistic expression and development with the times that we were in.
We were trying to say something about a community dynamic, access to arts, and the intrinsic right of people to become creatively and culturally participative, if there was to be true ownership in the society.
You had a radicalisation of the arts.
And given the context of the North, highly politicised, and understanding the contention of culture, I think that's why we had this big outpouring of creativity.
And the work felt immediately more important. It felt more a matter of life and death. I suppose everything in Belfast did at the time.
The West Belfast Festival did transform the cultural landscape of West Belfast. The interment parade, it was to mark the anniversary of the industrial interment.
The commemoration of interment time was usually greeted with buses burning and rioting and so on.
And then afterwards, it was just like it was a free-for-all, you know. I mean, there was more people killed during that week than any other week. People didn't stay in West Belfast during that period. You know, anybody had the money, the sense, got offside.
Feely and Football can claim that in West Belfast. They created a whole space for people to do stuff in the summer. It started very much as a political initiative by Sinn Féin, and while it still has that ethos, the actual activity of Feely and Football has become more arts-based as time has gone on, and in fact they talk about themselves now as a community arts activity.
You know, I was the first minority ethnic person to go and deliver something there, you know, so I have seen it grown.
Every performance that I went to as part of Feely and Football was packed, crammed with people from the area. Again, you know, taking ownership of their own culture and applauding the fact that they had a festival in their community.
Danny Devaney built the sets and reinvented White Rock Hall with what he calls the Feely artists. And they're all young people from West Belfast that are coming in, learning a bit of carpentry, doing a bit of painting, but the sense of you cannot instill pride in somebody like that. You know, they were proud of it. And there was never a sense of them feeling, you know, ashamed of being involved in the arts or not feeling that they didn't fit in, you know.
It's one of the most successful festivals in Europe, and people stay in West Belfast, people come to visit it, you know.
The arts changed that very destructive, negative scene, something that all the combined troops, all the battalions, the British Army and the RUC couldn't do, the arts did.
Apart from the hunger strike era, which lasted, you know, say 79 to 81, when the worst of it happened, everything was winding down. So that allowed the notion of the arts to emerge. People began to open up in a whole lot of different ways. Belfast City Centre began to open up in the early 80s. We began just to slowly normalise. And access and interest in the arts was part of that process.
Just a few years ago, there were no multi-storey car parks in the city. Today, there are 6 or 7. And that's an indication of the extent to which the people of Belfast and the businesses in Belfast are prepared to build and grow and build again. And I think that is a very healthy development for the city and for the future.
So that combination of the natural evolution of Western society to the point where more and more people want access to the arts, irrespective of background, and what was happening here politically, I think led to a particularly unique upsurge, or we'll use the word explosion, of arts activities, particularly community arts activities in Belfast.
For me, in terms of arts and developing community arts, the international side of things, in other words, looking out as well as looking at our own community and making connections was very important.
Boal was a big cornerstone for a lot of us.
Augusto Boal as well in theatre, and the Theatre of the Oppressed and so on.
But the festival is held here.
In this whole area?
In this whole area,
yes.
In the street.
In
here,
streets, yes.
Right here where we are.
Right here, yes.
Yeah.
The society he was coming from was a far more expressive society than our own, and we had a lot more work to do there first. And we had to learn those skills.
My question is, what you want from peace? Well, everything that you said, the other side wants to better jobs,
better jobs, better health, better education.
Everyone wants that.
Everybody wants that. It's the same principles for everyone.
So
it's just
peace is here.
Yes, it's like a parallel road. Somewhere along the line we'll have to meet and come to the junction. So there's we're on those twin parallel lines now. It's only a matter of crossing over and bringing the two together. So everybody has got the same basic principles of what life or what they're entitled to in life. That's for you. Oh, thank you very much. I hope you can take that back to Brazil.
He is one of the leading practitioners of the latter half of the 20th century. And we would owe him a huge debt in terms of community arts practice.
Different groups emerging saying we want to talk about what's happening to us. These groups are saying we want to talk about Ballybean, about the Shankill, about the New Lodge Road, Short Strand, about the core problems facing their lives, who they were and what they were. So there was this almost a throwing off of shackles or some type of repressive feeling that they had in the 70s that allowed them to begin to express themselves, and they chose to express themselves through the arts.
It's funny because there's a lot of organisations that I wouldn't have said were community arts, but now looking back, I know they were. Like whenever we did the Alice project in Botanic Gardens in 1985 with Cardiff Lab, and Mo Bates and Davy Calvert and those guys were running neighbourhood open workshops, and we were based in the crumbling Old Museum Arts Centre at that time. Well, it wasn't the Old Museum Arts Centre, but it was just the Old Museum. And the circus were doing stuff there, and neighbourhood open workshops were doing their stuff there. And there was a real sense of energy and a real sense of anything was possible. And the dedication of those people at that time, I just thought was incredible. And that they could create projects that catered for any ability, which always amazed me. And that the loyalty that they instilled in people that worked with them, I was always gobsmacked at. Because obviously everyone was doing it for nothing.
UVFDUPIRARUCOUFFRIP. Now you know my ABC. You won't want to play with me.
You know, it's people struggling with ideas of identity. All community arts work is identity-based. These are the things that people know most about is themselves. It's what we always try to draw out of people.
Again, it was a shock for me coming from Dublin to hear people using the words Catholic and Protestant. I gagged saying those words. You know, to say the word Protestant in company would have been extremely bad manners. Or, you know, it's just, why would you mention somebody else's religion? People freely spoke about stuff like this. So there was this constant cyclical talk about the Troubles, which you began to see as an element of people being just traumatised.
When I went to work in the New Lodge, I'd come from a Protestant unionist background. And so although I'd grown up in a nationalist community and my wider family would be both Catholic and Protestant, the formative influence, if you like, was a Protestant unionist influence. And so there were moments in the New Lodge where I was being really quite seriously challenged in terms of what I thought I was doing there, whether I had any business to be there. And to begin with, I didn't tell people what my background was because it didn't feel safe to do that. When I went in first morning, I was sleeping in the New Lodge and I opened my curtain and chalked on the pavement outside where I was staying was "Kill all Protestants." And I went, oh my God, they know I'm here, they know I'm here. Which of course people didn't know I was there, but you know, you had that fear and so for a long time I didn't say anything to people and I didn't tell people. My first engagement with any community drama group per se would have been Ballybean. I'm from Andersonstown. I had never been in Ballybean in my life, and I ended up in Ballybean through my boyfriend at the time who was working with them. Just watching how this was happening in the community group, and they had a wee store in the community centre, and they had 3 lights on a stand, and they had like a couple of chairs, but there was a real sense of purpose within that group and within those women at that time that I was amazed at.
We're based in Ballybean, but we have people from other communities as well in our group. So although it's community theatre, it can be a lot of communities in one. Yeah. The Morning Ring was a piece of work that we wanted to do about ourselves, about the Protestant people.
We actually researched, looked at our culture, went to libraries.
Often what you're doing is you're holding a space for people and making it safe for people. Richard Schechner talks about the art workshop as a place where very dangerous things can be said once a safe space has been established. And so what I'm always trying to do is to make that safe space. But it can't just be you doing it. At the end, it's got to be the group that's taking responsibility for the space. I remember one very particular moment when we were workshopping, and one of the groups that we were working with had done an image of a child lying on the ground, and people all turned looking the other way. And so I said to people, why have you made that image? And somebody in the group said, how long are we going to go on not seeing the child dead in the gutter?
And when people were asked to come into a community arts practice, they started talking in a different way about things, and they started taking bits and pieces of information from each other and making building blocks. So they were moving into progressive conversation.
My daughter Margaret was one of the twin. Her sister was called Bernadette. It was Bernadette who found herself in the midst of trouble, not Margaret. When there was trouble, Margaret always wanted to go home. That's what happened that night. She was only 13 when she was murdered. She was really only a child.
I had seen Bin Lids, and Bin Lids for me, which obviously was for a very niche audience. It was a production created in West Belfast for a West Belfast audience, and I got slated for that. But I thought, again, that was one of the great things about community arts. You could put it hand on its heart and say, look, listen, this is not about cross-community all the time. This is about giving voice to a story within a community for a community. And being able to articulate that, and for that to be accepted, I thought, again, was huge credit to a lot of the people that were kind of driving forward the whole community arts movement at that time.
I have never been so moved by a play in my life, and I love theatre and I'm passionate about theatre, but this was just, it was, I suppose, a combination of the fact that it was the story of the people who were in it. It was the story of some people who actually had died and were not in it. People who had been tortured and people who had been arrested and people who had suffered. And it was all there happening around us, and we were part of it because it was one of those promenade performances. So the audience were actually part of the action, and it was, I just find it even now incredibly moving. And there was one particular piece where a man was being tortured above us, and all that was happening was he was kind of stretched out against a piece of wire fence, and to me it was as though I was getting electric shocks because it was so real and so tremendously appropriate within the whole drama.
It combined community-based amateur actors, not amateur in the sense that they didn't know what they were doing, but the fact that they were doing it for love, alongside professional actors. So that really showed the difference in the two styles of acting and the two levels of engagement with the project.
Well, it was during the rehearsals of Bin Lids that we had first got to work with professionals, and it was tremendous the amount of skills that it taught us.
People coming and watching stuff that we have done see themselves so much in it, and they love it.
Plus
it's like watching themselves on the stage.
Plus they come because we're brilliant. I know we're brilliant.
People say my daddy is special because he is in heaven, but I would love him to live in our house. Please don't fight anymore, or other boys and girls could lose their daddies also. Isn't it time we stood together and listened to our children? Thank you.
Throughout the 90s and into the 2000s, there were a lot of changes. Labour government coming into power in 1997. Labour government developing target and social need. Labour government handing down all these policies to all public bodies, including the Arts Council.
When Blur came in, they were sending diktats down to Kelsang distribute this to working class communities.
So it's when Chris Smith in the Labour Party takes on himself to look at the role of arts and sports and regeneration and is extremely serious about that and says, you know, I know, I've seen, and I'm going to take a really serious interest in that. And he's really the only culture minister ever who's taken that level of serious interest in this kind of work.
Which enraged the Arts Council in Northern Ireland about, you know, social dimensions to who they were funding, what they were funding, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, we had an outcry in the papers from various arts groups and from the director of the Arts Council himself.
You all of a sudden had this kind of bigger family of people who all believed in the same basic principles, who were trying to achieve the same things, you know, in different locations and through different medium, but essentially that shared belief of the importance of authorship, ownership, access, participation to the arts, and the belief that it has the power to transform lives. So that was, you know, it was very easy then to become enthusiastic and to believe that great things were possible because you weren't a lone voice in the wilderness. One of the really important things for me was the wedding community play.
The wedding community play had this great energy. We brought everybody to the gala. We had an initial inclusive meeting where all the groups were invited. All the active community theatre groups in Belfast were all involved.
But the wedding was the first time groups from Protestant working class areas and Catholic working class areas worked together in such a very direct way.
Cross-community work manifested in the wedding play, and I think that was a subterranean theme that we didn't necessarily set out to ask, but kept coming up again and again and again throughout the process.
Are there points, this is my questions to you, are there points where we're still censoring ourselves because we don't want to offend other people?
We didn't really know what we were doing, but what we did know was that in the past people had been asked to come together in cross-community projects and love each other, and everything would be forgotten and they were going to have this very deep respect for each other, and we didn't ask anybody to do that. So what we said was, we just want you to work together.
So on all different kinds of levels, that wedding community play was very significant, and not least of which was a kind of peace building story within it about a mixed marriage, a marriage between a Catholic and a Protestant, that at that time, and probably to a certain extent today still, was a huge issue, was a huge issue when it happened in families. The play was site specific, so the audience went to the bride's house, which was in Protestant East Belfast, the groom's house, which was in Republican Short Strand. Then they went to the church for the wedding ceremony, and then they went to the afters, which was in the Edge, which was very symbolic. It was on the edge of the water, and communities on the edge.
Well, yes, we can go around, but I'm sensible by. But only from there, we can't go around from there. So it's all done.
The talks are proceeding. Well, joining me now is John Taylor, Deputy Leader of the Ulster Unionists, and Geoffrey Donaldson. Are you making progress in there?
We're certainly not doing what you were indicating earlier, Adam, and that is accepting a form of words from the IRA in return for Sinn Féin getting into the executive. We want.
My memory of the whole process of developing the wedding community play is of being part of that political process.
I mean, we had the early days where some of the Protestant groups became very cautious about being involved in it, just at a very general level, because it was happening at a very acute time. This was the lead up to the Good Friday Agreement, and there was intense discussions all over the place, particularly in the Ulster Unionist Party, who were trying to decide would they go into a power sharing arrangement with Sinn Féin.
We also had the Quinn family being burnt out of their house, and we had Oma. Oma was that August.
This is our first time performing this. Everybody's really, really nervous. We don't know if it works yet. This will be the test. See if we've got our timing right. See if
what are you doing now?
We're waiting on the audience bus to arrive.
Boss is here, everybody stand!
It's not too late, love.
For what?
I don't care everything's bought and paid for, that makes no odds.
Do you think I'm doing this to spite you or something? I love Damien, and how dare you say that my wedding day, would I change my mind?
Oh, no, I'm just saying to you what a father would say, you know, like a formality.
Oh, no, it isn't. Deep down inside you hope I will change my mind and not marry a Catholic. You'd be happier if I spent the rest of my life in boredom married to friggin' Darren.
Don't be getting yourself upset. I'm sorry.
Look, I love Damien now.
Ah, shit does know what she wants. Oh, Jesus, see, here's the cars. Go and get my man and the bridesmaids. Hurry up, hurry up.
The first day that it was performed was actually the day that the Ulster Unionist Council voted to support the Good Friday Agreement.
This is actually a very historic day for Northern Ireland. The Ulster Unionist Council voted 58 to 42 to follow the procedures which will give us a devolved government from next Wednesday, Thursday, and therefore a bit more hope for the future.
This is what we're all looking for and what we want. We want to be able to come into town and have no fear of anything going to happen, even in the future.
So there was a kind of a euphoria around what we had achieved and what they had achieved. In some way, what was happening at political level through the political parties was being mirrored by what was happening at the community level, and that was an extraordinary feeling. All the nationals came to see this wee play in Belfast. You know, the Financial Times, the Sunday Times, the Guardian, all came to flew into Belfast, reviewed it, went on the buses with us and all the trips. A really a landmark event.
In a way, it was everything that I think community arts can, and I'm not going to say should be, but you know, it showed me a reality that would not have been available to me by seeing something on the stage. It made me think there was a real unique power to community arts in Northern Ireland that I'd never seen anywhere else.
When community arts was introduced, it was to address social issues. And the Arts Council at the time were saying to our major cultural institutions, you know, don't worry and don't fear for quality, because this initiative is being resourced from education, social money, Department of Education. It's not arts money, you know, so don't worry, the arts and the quality of arts is safe. So we started with that, where community arts was outside the arts box and was wanted to be kept outside of there.
There was a monumental fight with the Arts Council of Northern Ireland, between Arts Council of Northern Ireland and community arts activists locally throughout really the 90s.
There were lots of moments of clashes between community arts activists, really making the argument with the Arts Council that it wasn't fulfilling its own charter, that its own charter said that the arts should be for everyone and that the arts blatantly were not for everyone.
The Arts Council was given out at that time £7.5 million. 200,000 was going to community arts, to the majority of people. Wow, come on, dead simple argument.
And it culminated, in fact, in a march to Decal offices in York Street, saying that we want our fair share of the cake.
The amount of money that's given to the arts, and this small piece in here is the percentage, 6.5% of the total percentage that's actually given to the community arts sector. That's the very sector that is actually helping to demystify the arts and redefine culture and arts here in the north of Ireland. And it's important that all our communities band together to increase that from 6.5 to a larger sum, so that all of us can have access to and participate in the arts. Could I just thank you all for turning up today? Thank you.
The community arts spend doubled.
We just relentlessly went at it to the point where we took the formation of the Arts Council Board out of the hands of the Arts Council.
and for the first time the board of the Arts Council was advertised publicly instead of being handpicked.
And that signalled somewhat of the change within the Arts Council, that at that time anyway they had to take community arts serious.
Community arts is a fantastic, fantastic tool to solve and to combat many issues, you know, and one should be applying to this, whether it is from political side of things, or whether it is from artist point of view, or whether it is from a community need point of view.
There's a lot of studies now being done on, you know, the road from trauma to violence. And there is a very basic attitude that we have as community, as a world community, that, you know, and then that comes down to family, is that we need to vilify, we need to have a bad person. Jerry Moriarty, who I'd worked with on quite a lot of different projects, had been asked to go in and work in Mount Vernon on this community development strategy using the arts. And I was asked to go in and do the creative writing element.
And I was invited to document that process. And one of the processes they had was, could arts change the community, and could arts help articulate the needs of that community?
The man who's probably most responsible for it is Billy Hutchinson. He came out of prison in the early 90s, and I was impressing upon him the importance of the arts and what arts can do for the individual. And he says, no, Martin, he says, no, he says, sport. Sport is what does it for young people. It keeps them off the streets, keeps them out of jail. He says the arts, he says our people don't get the arts.
They then started talking about the way that people who wrote about Mount Vernon were representing it. And yes, there was full acknowledgement that there was, you know, there was paramilitary affiliations, that, you know, the community had a name that associated it with various factions, and that also that some of those factions might get up to stuff that didn't paint Mount Vernon in a very good light. But there was also a community there of almost 1,000 people who were not vermin, who were not Mount Vermin, as the press wanted to call them. So what we started to talk about was how they would like the press to speak about them in new ways. So we got the, you know, we did mock-ups of Belfast Telegraph headlines and Sunday World headlines, and we came up with headlines like, Mount Vernon turns it around. In 6 months, Mount Vernon has been able to turn around a perception. Or we used the term Mount Vermin then, besides some of these other positive headlines, just so that people could be aware of how difficult it would be to rise above somebody continually describing you in this way, and that there are ordinary people trying to make a decent living and have decent lives that are in the community, who aren't being allowed to rise above people who want to sell papers.
I can remember coming out of a meeting one day, a particular activity one day with Hutchinson, and I said, remember you fucking argued with me about arts being shite and all? I says, what do you think now? He says, no, he says, you're right. He now believes in the arts as much as me or you as being transformatory vehicles for change.
The community arts is such medicine for areas like Mount Vernon, you know, areas that need to express themselves, you know, and hard better doing that than the arts, you know. I mean, you've got your theatre, your writing, you can do your murals, you can do flags, but they don't have to be paramilitary flags, but you can tell your story through the arts. That's what the arts is all about. And people here have so many deserving stories that need to be told, you know.
The Beat Initiative have helped to transform parades in the city, from parades being very confrontational, very angry events, to parades being occasions where residents of the city could celebrate the city.
I'm quite against arts just being seen as a tool in the social work toolbox. rattles around and you bring it out when you want a job done. It includes that because it does do social work very well. I think one of the things that arts brings is the transformative process. It's not just about managing situations. At the time that we were doing the Dancing Parade, the social work mechanisms had broken down. There were riots with police, but the interface areas, things like the telephone network that's used to communicate and solve problems had broken down. So all the social work mechanisms that had been put in place to manage the situation weren't working, and the only thing at the time that was keeping people working together and with some form of relationship across the interface there was an arts project. People from the area who saw groups from one side of the interface coming out onto the road to join in with the parade were saying they literally had butterflies in their stomach because all they could think of was that it meant there was going to be trouble, and instead people were literally embracing each other. The carnival from the beginning was very much about working across the city with different communities to do something in the city centre where people didn't go at that time and didn't do things together.
We had 4 weeks to recruit 1,000 volunteers to perform. And now that was just the performers. About 200 volunteers to steward, man it, all that stuff. But the build up to it and the classes and the dance stuff that happens with the kids and the making of stuff and people arriving for costume fittings and the morning of the parade and everybody lined up the side of rooms, all sitting in rows, adults, kids, every walk of life, sitting waiting on the person coming along with a sponge to give them the couple of flowers on the side of their face or paint their face bright blue, and then they had to wait for 2.5 hours, and then they had to queue for an hour, and then the go ahead went and the parade kicked off. Realising there were like 5 people deep lined Royal Avenue, people going bananas, you know, and it was just the sense of achievement, there's a sense of exhaustion you get with one of those days that there's no other sense of exhaustion like it, you know, your feet are wrecked, you're wrecked, like every bone in your body is sore, but you just can't help laughing at the madness of it. Or watching, like there was a friend of mine who's a civil servant who is the most straight guy I know, who was a candle on the top of a 3-tiered white and pink cake being pushed up Royal Avenue. And the shock of people in the crowd who didn't expect to see him, that element of it was amazing.
If you're talking about giving people the opportunity to see something creative and cultural and maybe go on beyond that to something else, then Carnival's the way to start. It's just wonderful to see that spectacle, to see everyone turning out on the streets. I love to see any kind of art in the open, but to see something which is so impressive and so full of skills and where people have contributed by working beforehand and creating the artifacts beforehand, I think it can only be good for the whole of Northern Ireland. If you come from a disadvantaged or deprived background, or if you have a disability, you have so many other things against you that it's 10 times more important for you to have the opportunity to participate in the arts. It gives you the chance to express yourself. It gives you self-confidence as you see that you can do things. It helps you to collaborate with other people, and it's just so beneficial in terms of your health and in terms of your own sense of your self-worth.
And I'll tell a small story about it. I remember, and I'm still friendly with this person actually. He worked in an adult learning centre in West Belfast, and he worked with 15 adult Down syndrome individuals. and he wanted them to get involved in the carnival. And this was 10 days before carnival, and I was like, oh no, where are we going to put them? I don't think we can get them in. And then we just got the weather forecast through, and we realised the next 2 weeks they were expecting a heat wave. We were all discussing water. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Bingo, that's what we'll do. The adult Down syndromes would be the water people. So we rang whatever the local supermarket was, and they gave us 15 shopping trolleys, and we just piled them with water. And these guys designed flags for the top of their trolleys, and they all got given, all it was tissue paper tabards. And each of these adults got given a shopping trolley. It actually still moves me when I think about it. And we did this pep talk with them before they went out, that they were in charge of the water, and that's what they were in charge of. Well, you have never seen a sense of achievement like that. I can't believe I'm getting emotional. But it was amazing to watch. And they still talk about that. And the guy who worked with them, he said, like, that lasted 2 years. And the following year they were involved again. But that first year, just finding the tiniest sense of how you give people a purpose.
Any of you who have built a sizable building on Belfast's alluvium clays, Belfast's leach as it's known locally, or as we call it in our office, reinforced water, will know that very often you have to go down before you can go up. I think we've been down long enough.
Arguably, as a community, we are striving to move on from the bitter divisions and trauma of the past, and to contemplate the vibrancy of possibility as we embark upon this transition to a potentially new beginning.
The community arts has, over the years, has changed its perspective, and it has changed its way of delivery, and it's tackling so many problems, and also bringing so much to travel, tourism, economic issues, and especially, the human being issues.
I suppose one of the biggest influences would be, in actual fact, the creation of the district we're sitting in right now, where at the core level, the real catalyst for what we now know as Cathedral Quarter came from the community arts individuals. They influenced what has become a multi-million-pound operation.
Laganside were given control of the Cathedral Quarter area, and certainly arts groups were very successful in changing the perception of this area, and Laganside itself did contribute. Martin and I were sitting in the what has now become Writers' Square, and I was saying to Martin, really, Martin, we need to get Laganside to commit something, and what should happen, but one of the Laganside employees started to walk towards us, and I said to that employee, hey, look, if you're really interested in community arts, if you're really interested in supporting the arts, what you need to do is, and then this idea just came to me, I said, what you need to do is put us in that building there, and I pointed to a building, one of the most prestigious buildings in the whole Cathedral Quarter, a nice glass-fronted building. I says, what you need to do is put Community Arts Forum in there as a visual statement to your commitment for the arts. And they did indeed do that.
Circus School was one of the first was transformed into an art space, creating, like I said, the first circus school in Ireland, and really helping the Cathedral Quarter transform itself into an arts and cultural destination for the city.
It's funny that the circus started around the same time as Belfast Exposed in 1883. I did think of the circus like, what a minute, there's enough jokers, there's enough like circus clowns in Belfast without doing circus, what's all this circus stuff about? But having seen it at first hand, the way they work, I thought it was fantastic.
Our experience in terms of how a circus crosses divides and builds bridges is that we do let circus do the talking. What happens is that people find not just a shared interest, but a necessity of cooperation and the value of trust.
We need to give people an opportunity of learning about diversity. And diversity, I mean, is all cultures, and also to embrace the green and the orange, you know, because that was big time, very much divided, you know, so never mind about the Indian or the Polish or the Chinese, but it has to be that those other two indigenous communities have to be embraced as well.
We need to be able to evolve a new language in community arts so that people know what we're doing. We need to be able to evolve a new language as a community so that people will be able to understand what it is that we want. There isn't really any other way of doing that apart from your culture.
For a minority ethnic's point of view, the peace process, you know, brought a lot of racism out. The minute that Good Friday Agreement was signed, there was a lot of negativities about, you know, and racial abuse. People like us or organisations like us took that on board and see, right, okay, we will be able to tackle this problem in our own ways. And what we did was bringing it through the medium of festivals, getting people engaged, whether you're from north, east, west, south, let's engage, but medium of arts. I like what is happening in this city. You know, it is really, really, really good.
That shared society has to be the belief about, you know, you're an extension of me. You know, you are me. I think already we're beginning to see the legacy that's happened. I think that there are people that are attending the arts now in Belfast and in Northern Ireland who have come through a community arts process and a community arts experience.
Mount Vernon, in New Lodge Arts, in Upper Springfield Development Trust, through the Greater Shankill Partnership. They are the future audiences, they are tomorrow's audiences of the arts, and that is so important. And I see community arts as creating a broader range of audiences for the arts, so it's taken out of the hands of a very small elite, and it's making arts much more acceptable to a wider range of people.
The numbers of people who have been affected by the arts work that we do. Some of them maybe just for a day, but many of them for long periods of time, and many of them in life-changing ways.
There's a lot of work that could very easily become undone.
You have the mainstream arts, and it's been existing for hundreds of years, and it will continue to exist. And its sole task is consolidating that power structure. Community arts is about trying to challenge that structure, and it has to be challenged. It's like freedom. It's a thing you got to challenge every minute of the day. And along comes a government, along comes an individual, and will wipe out all those gains. And that is kind of going to happen, that the gains are all going to go, and all that experience, all that know-how disappears, and all that ideology disappears, and it's left for another generation to try and gain all that knowledge once again, reinventing itself, which shouldn't happen. Community arts should be embedded and safeguarded and similar to any other art form, but it isn't. It's always seen as something external, or it's always under threat.
One of the biggest problems that we're facing in terms of community arts at the moment and arts in Northern Ireland is the desire to dumb down what's happened over the years. The place that has fought to have its voice and fought to have its people heard is now being told to pretend that that didn't happen. And it's back to the old Seamus Heaney, whatever you say nothing.
People talk about community arts projects that they've been involved in with a sense of it was so unique, it was so one-off, and that the passion and the energy and the length of hours you put into it inevitably means you get the sense of mad euphoria. But all of those projects were at certain points in time, socially, politically, but also at certain points in people's lives.
Community arts has been a huge part of my life, and in many ways it is my it is my life. And what it meant to me personally was when I had a family to support, starting up an community arts organisation, a youth arts organisation, when I didn't really know where we were going or how to sustain it, 4 children to keep, and there was nothing there. So it wasn't an easy thing, and I think that's been the case for a lot of us.
It's like being involved in politics without having to be a politician or a member of a political party, in that make a difference to people's lives in a way that involves their exercise of choice rather than compulsion.
It's been my passion. I love to go into the workshops as much as I possibly can, and to see the power of that creativity working on people whose lives are really not very exciting in general, and to see the amount of energy they absorb from those arts activities.
Every time I see people who have never lifted a paintbrush before, never worked with any modelling tools, never attempted to be poets, but yet they become poets. They create and produce beautifully defined, beautifully crafted pieces of work. It's incredibly rewarding, and it sustains me, and I know it sustains a lot of people in this area.
Something I stumbled into for different reasons 30 years ago, but now it's given me the opportunity. I've developed a career, and it's something that I love. It's provided me with the opportunity to tell my story. Within the community arts sector.
Fantastic times for me personally. I've been involved in some exciting stuff. I've lain in bed at nights, not being able to sleep with excitement about a project.
It is in it of itself completely about who you are and who your community is, and this thing, you wouldn't do it if you didn't have this incredible belief in humankind.
It's brought me in contact with people at all levels in society who want to make positive changes happen, and there's nothing more inspiring.
I think the prevailing ideology of arts has been challenged in that arts is no longer hand-me-down, that everyone should have the opportunity to engage in arts, and arts isn't always about the individual, it isn't always about product, it's about processes, and it's about the democratisation of the arts. And communities throughout the UK and in Ireland realise that they should be able to engage in arts in their community, and they should be able to express themselves, and their children should have opportunity, not just for the few. Theatre whose scripts were derived and ideas were derived from the concerns of the people at that particular time and enacted on the stage.
Lizzie was Ballymurphy. We were in Turf Lodge, in fact. We landed each other lights at one stage and stuff like that.
But it was all very radical theatre, all very agitprop and all delivering a message.
Oh dear, what can the matter be? There's no jobs for the likes of me. I would do anything you like to offer me. I'm just an unemployed Catholic.
Going to People's Theatre was an experience. Not only had I to transverse across the most dangerous part of the city, but you had to go up to the mill, and getting up those steps was those stone steps, very dangerous. But when you got into the People's Theatre, it was a fantastic experience to see theatre that made you laugh, made you cry, really gripped you with the issues that they were beginning to deal with.
Me and my mates go around and catch rats.
As people become more educated in this society, they want more arts. When you keep people ignorant and uneducated and illiterate, as my parents were, they don't know about the arts. Straight away from our very first play, We Want Work, We Want Bread, in 1976, we had an audience. And we've always had an audience.
If we're going to face up to the men on the committee, we may as well face up to them in the house too. Do you mean to tell me if he orders me to make him a job of tea, I can tell him to go and lick me arse? Well, if that's how you want to put it, Molly, yes, our days of second-class citizenship are over.
Very strong responses from audiences to them. People identified them with them straight away, which of course brings the lie or puts the lie on that people don't go to, people in class areas aren't interested in theatre. We would decide to do a play that would thematically be about housing, or it would be about people on the dole.
There were traffic jams at 7:15 at night. Everyone was trying to get to the events in the festival to get some culture which they had been starved of for the rest of the year. It wasn't the ordinary people of Belfast.
It was just so removed. It was irrelevant to the lives of, I think, most people in sort of disadvantaged, marginalised societies.
I never knew anybody in my life up to that 25 years of age who I would have known went to the theatre. Nobody ever came back to me and said, I saw a great play last night.
The wider context was quite piecemeal. There were no clear funding streams, or the sort of bigger organisations were only starting to be developed.
Certainly I believe the Arts Council, that was part of their task, to try and keep this view of a balanced society, and the arts were seen as a stabilising, civilising influence. If you had introduced people who were questioning society, they would have been seen by people outside the arts as, oh, you're siding with the terrorists. That was the accusation. Oh, you're giving sustenance to terrorists. So the Arts Council, unfortunately, turned its back basically on any forms of art that contained politics. It found it very hard to deal with big political issues, and indeed artists themselves found it very difficult to deal with issues. They would be seen as being divisive or disruptive or taking sides.
I tell the story now without any embarrassment that when Michael Longley and the Arts Council turned us down, I went to Billy McMillan, the commanding officer of the official area in Belfast, and asked him for £50 for our first set, and he gave me it. The only other community theatre groups that I knew in Belfast right through the 70s would have been ourselves and Desi Wilson.
And really it was...
I remember being asked by a member of the trust that I worked for at the time. I said to him, I was a very wealthy man, and he said, and where are you working, dear? And I said, I'm working on a council estate. And he said, on a council estate? What would a council estate? What would arts have to do with a council estate?
The upsurge of community activity in Belfast didn't happen as it did in England here, because like every other sphere of life, we were hindered by the Troubles. Whole range of things like women's rights, the place of women in society, didn't happen here later. Equal pay, whole areas of social legislation didn't happen here because we were more concerned with staying alive.
The 70s was pretty much a desolate period from where I came from, sort of growing up.
In a car came down the Anthem Road and he just rolled the window down, hung out, and just started spraying the bullets all around us.
I all run in this shop. I just felt everything hit me and I fell on the ground there.
And then there was blood, just continuous blood everywhere, just everywhere now.
You had a kind of populist culture which tended to revolve around music.
That was the valve that people were able to sort of let loose and have a sense of identity.
And then you had, as it were, the Arts Council's idea of culture, which tended to be principally the Ulster Orchestra and the Lyric Theatre.
Right, I think what we'll get is a walking in shot, and then you can sort out who they are. The one in the golden dress a few bit back is Princess Margarita of Romania. We've also got the one in the blue dress is the Duchess of Roxburgh.
Well, it was a Protestant or a Catholic working class background. Arts were handed out from high, and working class people had very little experience of arts.
The Queen's Festival. It was very obvious that it wasn't the city itself, it was the Queen's academics and the academics' wives, and that they were seizing this opportunity.
In West Belfast and the Falls Road, the arts were non-existent.
So I came to Belfast in 1974, and I just couldn't believe that for a city which is roughly the same size as Edinburgh, maybe slightly smaller, and nobody went out anywhere, and the city centre was totally empty after 5 o'clock at night. And of course the reason for it was that the Troubles were preventing people from going out.
People were so scared to go out to theatres or whatever they were doing. It was within their own community.
was a free-for-all, you know. You had your rioting, you had your shootings.
And to put it bluntly, in the 70s and 80s, the leadership that we had around us was paramilitary leadership, very much so, you know. And that's what had such a big effect on communities and what they did and what some of those individuals and young people within those communities did and where they ended up.
It was very divided. Every area had their own niche.
Would you like to say a few words, sir?
Just discuss the poetic situation here at the moment. It's dire. Belfast will erupt shortly.
Tit-for-tat killings, you know, people terrified to walk down the streets. I mean, I remember one young girl saying to me, we had a workshop and we were talking about what was heaven like. And she said, heaven would be walking down to the bottom of my street and not worrying about being shot before I got to the bottom of it.